good night. My name is Eliana, and today I will interpret the video. Does political dialogue help to reduce violence in conflict?
I am the assistant director at an organization that is active in mediation in armed conflict. What that means, part of what that means, is that I talk to people who kill, bomb, fight, sometimes torture. And I try to persuade them to give up that violence. Sometimes that works, but you only have to look at the news to know that large parts of our world are on fire. Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Mexico, Northern Ireland, the list goes on. The reality is that conflict often rages on, despite our best efforts to stop it.
Saya adalah asisten direktur di sebuah organisasi yang bergerak dalam mediasi konflik bersenjata. Artinya, sebagian dari pekerjaan saya adalah berbicara dengan orang-orang yang membunuh, mengebom, bertempur, bahkan kadang menyiksa. Dan saya berusaha meyakinkan mereka untuk menghentikan kekerasan itu. Kadang berhasil, tapi cukup melihat berita untuk tahu bahwa sebagian besar dunia kita masih terbakar. Suriah, Yaman, Irak, Meksiko, Irlandia Utara, dan masih banyak lagi. Konflik terus berlangsung meskipun segala upaya telah dilakukan untuk mengakhirinya.
In addition to suffering from a low success rate, my job is also not always safe. Working on conflict inevitably means working in conflict zones, which in turn means difficult, dangerous, extreme situations. As a human being, as a woman, and more recently as a mother, I find that very difficult, but it's a part of my job. To give you an example, some years ago I traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo, as I do quite often, to talk to the leadership of a rebel group. The journey was very long. We had to go to a remote part of a jungle, and the meeting was to take place in a UN camp, which is relatively safe. But when we got there, the leadership said, look, we still want to meet you, but we no longer want to meet you in the camp, because there had been a lot of fighting that day and they didn't want to get stuck.
Selain tingkat keberhasilannya yang rendah, pekerjaan ini juga tidak selalu aman. Bekerja di bidang konflik berarti juga harus turun ke wilayah konflik, yang artinya harus menghadapi situasi yang sulit, berbahaya, dan ekstrem. Sebagai manusia, sebagai perempuan, dan baru-baru ini sebagai seorang ibu, hal itu tidak mudah bagi saya. Tapi itu bagian dari pekerjaan saya. Sebagai contoh, beberapa tahun yang lalu saya melakukan perjalanan ke Republik Demokratik Kongo, hal yang sering saya lakukan, untuk berbicara dengan pemimpin kelompok pemberontak. Perjalanan itu sangat panjang, kami harus pergi ke daerah terpencil di dalam hutan. Pertemuan dijadwalkan di sebuah camp PBB yang relatif aman. Tetapi ketika kami tiba, pimpinan kelompok itu berkata mereka tetap ingin bertemu, namun tidak lagi di camp itu. Karena pada hari yang sama, terjadi banyak pertempuran dan mereka tidak ingin terjebak.
Which, in the context, fair enough, but for me that meant I had to make a decision. Do I leave the relative safety of this camp to go with people who I knew had done awful things, to a little mud hut in a little village with no protection, in a country that is rife with violence, and a cruel violence at that. So it was difficult. In the end, we decided to go, and I'm glad we did. I'm standing here today, so I was fine. But the reality is that I could have gotten hurt. So in a nutshell, my job is not always successful, often not successful, and not always safe. So you might reasonably ask, why do it? aside from being very interesting, the real reason why I do what I do is quite simply, if it works, it's utterly amazing.
Dalam konteks tersebut, alasan mereka masuk akal, tapi bagi saya itu harus membuat keputusan. Apakah saya meninggalkan keamanan relatif dari camp itu untuk pergi bersama orang-orang yang saya tahu pernah melakukan hal-hal kejam? Ke sebuah gubuk kecil, di desa terpencil tanpa perlindungan, di negara yang penuh dengan kekerasan yang brutal. Itu keputusan yang sulit. Akhirnya kami memutuskan untuk pergi, dan saya bersyukur kami melakukannya. Saya berdiri di sini hari ini, jadi saya selamat. Tapi kenyataannya, saya bisa saja terluka. Jadi secara singkat, pekerjaan saya tidak selalu berhasil dan tidak selalu aman. Maka mungkin muncul pertanyaan, mengapa saya tetap melakukannya? Selain karena sangat menarik, alasan utamanya sederhana. Kalau berhasil, hasilnya luar biasa.
We have, for example, successfully negotiated the end of an armed group, which included the witnessing of the destruction of their weapons. Those weapons that I saw destroyed are never going to kill anybody again. It's that simple, and that's why I do it. One of the questions that I get asked the most about my job is, what's it like to talk to these people? What's it like to talk to people who commit violence, who do very extreme things, who kill other human beings? The answer to that question, I think, can be a little bit disappointing for the people who ask me that, because my answer is very simple. But I wanted to share it with you today because it is, in fact, the most significant thing that I've learned thus far from my job.
Kami misalnya pernah berhasil bernegosiasi dengan sebuah kelompok bersenjata hingga mereka membubarkan diri, termasuk menyaksikan langsung penghancuran senjata mereka. Senjata-senjata yang saya lihat dihancurkan itu tidak akan pernah membunuh siapapun lagi. Sesederhana itu. Dan itulah mengapa saya melakukan pekerjaan ini. Salah satu pertanyaan yang paling sering saya terima adalah, seperti apa rasanya berbicara dengan orang-orang seperti itu? Dengan orang-orang yang melakukan kekerasan, yang melakukan hal-hal ekstrem, yang membunuh orang lain. Jawabannya mungkin terdengar mengecewakan bagi sebagian orang karena sangat sederhana. Tapi saya ingin membagikannya hari ini karena ini adalah pelajaran paling penting yang saya dapat dari pekerjaan ini.
It might make you look a little bit differently at the person sitting next to you right now, and that's okay. But I hope it'll make you look a little bit differently at yourself, because I think that's important. And that's kind of the point of my talk today. So, to answer that question, what's it like to talk to these people who commit violence? It's really normal, because they are really normal. They're people like you and I. They have opinions. They feel strongly about some things, not others. They have feelings. There are people that they care about. Some of them are really funny. Others are totally not. Some of them talk a lot, and others are really quiet. Some of them have a family, children, a partner, and others don't. In a nutshell, they are people like us, like you and I. But they chose to do different things. They kill people, and I'm going to assume most of us here today don't.
Jawaban ini mungkin membuat Anda melihat orang di sebelah Anda dengan cara yang berbeda. Dan itu tidak masalah. Tapi saya harap Anda juga akan melihat diri Anda sendiri dengan cara yang berbeda. Karena itu penting. Dengan itu sebenarnya inti dari pembicaraan saya hari ini. Jadi, seperti apa rasanya berbicara dengan orang-orang yang melakukan kekerasan? Rasanya sangat biasa. Karena mereka memang orang biasa. Mereka seperti kita, punya pendapat, punya perasaan yang kuat tentang beberapa hal, peduli pada orang-orang terdekat mereka. Beberapa dari mereka lucu, lainnya tidak. Ada yang cerewet, ada yang pendiam. Ada yang punya keluarga, anak, pasangan, ada juga yang tidak. Intinya mereka manusia, punya sesuatu yang seperti kita. Hanya saja mereka memilih untuk melakukan hal yang berbeda. mereka membunuh orang, dan saya anggap kita yang ada di sini tidak melakukannya.
That option of violence also was more readily available to them because they were in a situation that was more characterized by violence. And let's face it, that matters. After all, if there was no conflict, you wouldn't have that many reasons to pick up arms. If nobody was being oppressed, you didn't really have anybody to stand up to. If there was no enemy, you don't really have a side to join. And the truth is that most of us normal people, if we find ourselves in a situation where violence is normal every day, institutionalized, promoted, even rewarded, most of us participate. By that I mean most of us commit violence, hurt other people, facilitate violence. We are all capable of that.
Pilihan kekerasan itu lebih mudah diakses oleh mereka karena mereka hidup dalam situasi yang dipenuhi oleh kekerasan. Dan mari kita akui, itu sangat berpengaruh. Kalau tidak ada konflik, mungkin tak banyak alasan untuk mengangkat senjata. Kalau tak ada penindasan, tak ada pihak yang harus dilawan. Kalau tak ada musuh, tak ada pihak yang harus dibela. Kenyataannya, kebanyakan dari kita orang biasa, jika berada dalam situasi di mana kekerasan menjadi hal yang biasa, dilembagakan bahkan dihargai, kita pun bisa terlibat. Kita bisa menyakiti orang lain atau memfasilitasi kekerasan. Kita semua punya potensi untuk melakukan itu.
It's not a very pleasant thing to think about, that we're all capable of violence, but it's important for two reasons. The first is very important in my job. Namely, people are not what they do. They kill somebody. They're not a killer. And what that means is they can choose not to kill. And what that in turn means is there is light at the end of the tunnel that is conflict. And that means my job has a point, which is pretty fundamental. The other reason why it's really important to realize the potential for violence in all of us is more important, I think, and more important for my purpose here today. Namely that, as Carl Jung, Dr. Phil, or any AA meeting really will tell you, you cannot change what you don't acknowledge.
Itu bukan hal yang menyenangkan untuk dipikirkan bahwa kita semua bisa melakukan kekerasan. Tapi penting untuk dua alasan. Yang pertama, yang sangat penting dalam pekerjaan saya, seseorang tidak dapat didefinisikan hanya dari apa yang pernah ia lakukan. Seseorang mungkin membunuh, tapi itu bukan berarti dia seorang pembunuh. Yang artinya, dia bisa memilih untuk tidak membunuh. Dan artinya lagi, selalu ada harapan di ujung terowongan konflik. Artinya, pekerjaan saya punya tujuan, dan itu penting. Alasan kedua yang saya rasa lebih penting untuk kita semua hari ini, seperti kata Carl Jung, Dr. Phil, atau siapapun di rapat AA, kita tidak bisa mengubah apa yang tidak kita lalui.
And if we would be able to change this just a little bit, that would be such an improvement from where we are today. To give you one example of a very human interaction that I had in the context of my work, which is very characterized by violence, at some point I was working with a leader of an armed group, had been working with him for a while, and one of our meetings involved the collection of weapons in his living room, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best location for a number of reasons, but that's what happened. It was a normal living room. It had some furniture, it had some toys because he shared it with his wife and his child, and some religious paraphernalia, and a whole bunch of weapons spread out on the floor. Halfway through that meeting, his wife comes home with their child in tow, and she was pissed off. I presume he told her, either didn't tell her or told her, the weapons would be gone by the time she got home, but they weren't. And so she wasn't happy. And that totally derailed our meeting. It was no longer about what we were doing, but it was about him trying to say, that he was sorry and trying to make up to his wife.
Dan kalau kita bisa mengubah sedikit saja dari hal itu sudah jadi kemajuan besar dari kondisi kita sekarang. Sebagai contoh, saya ingin menceritakan interaksi yang sangat manusiawi dalam konteks pekerjaan saya yang sangat dekat dengan kekerasan. Suatu kali saya bekerja dengan pimpinan sebuah kelompok bersenjata. Kami sudah cukup lama bekerja bersama dan salah satu pertemuan kami dilakukan di ruang tamu rumahnya. Dalam retrospeksi, mungkin itu bukan lokasi terbaik karena berbagai alasan, tapi begitulah yang terjadi. Ruang tamunya tampak biasa, ada perabot, mainan anak, perlengkapan ibadah, dan deret senjata di lantai. Di tengah-tengah pertemuan, istrinya pulang membawa anak mereka. Dia terlihat sangat marah. Saya menduga suaminya sebelum dia pulang tidak bilang bahwa senjatanya akan disingkirkan, tapi nyatanya belum. Dan itu langsung mengacaukan pertemuan kami yang tadinya tentang senjata berubah jadi soal suami yang minta maaf ke istrinya dan berusaha menenangkan situasi.
As a person who's married and who's been in relationships, as I'm sure a lot of us have been, that's a very recognizable dynamic. If you violate the boundaries of your relationship, the other person's going to be angry. And if you care about them, you're going to care about that and try to fix it. So, yeah, they're people like us. To give you an example of some historical examples of how and when we all participated in violence, to make it a little bit more real, and there are numerous ones, so I'm just picking a few. You have, for example, the Dirty War in Argentina, where countless people were disappeared. Normal people carried out those disappearances. Normal pilots flying planes, for example, or people telling on other people where they were.
Sebagai orang yang sudah menikah, dan saya yakin banyak dari Anda juga pernah berada dalam hubungan, dinamika seperti itu sangat bisa dimengerti. Kalau kita melanggar batas dalam hubungan, pasangan kita akan marah. Dan kalau kita peduli, kita juga akan peduli pada kemarahan itu dan mencoba memperbaikinya. Jadi mereka manusia biasa seperti kita. Mari kita lihat beberapa contoh sejarah nyata di mana orang-orang biasa terlibat dalam kekerasan. Misalnya perang kotor di Argentina, di mana banyak orang dihilangkan. Orang-orang biasa yang melakukannya pilot pesawat atau mereka yang memberitahu lokasi persembunyian seseorang.
I'm thinking of the torture regime in Algeria in the War of Independence, where soldiers, true enough, maybe not ordinary people off the street, but normal soldiers who normally are not tasked to torture other people, all participated in doing some very horrible things to other human beings. And I'm thinking of right here, because you get the feeling that we always kind of think about this kind of violence as elsewhere, but during World War II, right here, a large number of Jews, Roma, disabled people were deported and killed with the help of ordinary citizens. All examples of normal people in a normal role in their life who were able to do really awful things. There's an experiment called the Milgram experiment. That experiment goes as follows. A person off the street is selected to go into a room. A primary school teacher, a student, your barista, whatever. They're put in a room with a person with a white coat present. And the person with the white coat always is reassuring them.
Saya juga memikirkan tentang rezim penyiksaan di Aljazair saat perang kemerdekaan. Mungkin bukan orang sipil biasa, tapi para tentara biasa yang sebenarnya tidak ditugaskan untuk menyiksa, semuanya terlibat dalam tindakan keji terhadap sesama manusia. Bahkan di sini, selama Perang Dunia Kedua, banyak orang Yahudi, Roma, dan penyandang disabilitas dideportasi dan dibunuh dengan bantuan warga biasa. Semua itu menunjukkan bagaimana orang-orang biasa dalam kehidupan sehari-hari mampu melakukan hal-hal yang mengerikan. Ada eksperimen bernama eksperimen Milgram, dan begini prosesnya. Orang biasa dari jalanan, guru, pelajar, barista, dan lain-lain diminta untuk masuk ke ruangan bersama seseorang berseragam jas putih yang terlihat berwenang.
The person, the subject, is tasked with administering a shock to another person in the next room. Let me not forget that that person is an actor. Sometimes I do that and that kind of flips the story on its head a little bit, or at least is awful. So the person in the room is asked to administer an electric shock to the other person in the room next to them whenever they get the answer to a question wrong. With each following question that they get wrong, they're asked to increase the voltage of the shock. And all the while, the person in the white coat says, okay, it's fine, it's totally fine. But they can hear the person in the next room screaming because it hurts, banging on the door because they want to be let out, and begging for mercy.
Subjek diminta untuk memberikan kejutan listrik kepada orang lain di ruangan sebelah setiap kali mereka menjawab pertanyaan dengan salah. Setiap kesalahan, voltasenya dinaikkan. Orang dengan jas putih terus meyakinkan bahwa semuanya baik-baik saja. Tapi subjek bisa mendengar orang di ruangan sebelah berteriak kesakitan, mengetuk pintu, dan memohon belas kasihan.
2/3 of those people administered what they knew to be lethal shocks to the person in the next room, despite this fact. Normal people. It's not a very comfortable thing to think about, that we are all capable of doing these things. It's a kind of staring into the abyss of what you would really do if nobody's looking. Or if you're in a room full of people like we are today, and everybody is a part of a torture campaign or has a very strong opinion about a group of a different ethnicity, are you strong enough to stand up and say, I am not going to participate in this? The truth is that most of us aren't strong enough to do that, or choose not to be strong enough to do that. We don't. We participate. We go along, often.
2/3 dari peserta tetap memberikan kejutan listrik yang mereka tahu bisa mematikan, meskipun sadar akan akibatnya. Orang-orang biasa memang tidak nyaman untuk dipikirkan bahwa kita semua punya potensi untuk melakukan hal seperti itu, seperti mengintip ke sisi tergelap dalam diri. Apa yang akan Anda lakukan kalau tidak ada yang melihat, atau jika semua orang di sekitar Anda ikut serta dalam kampanye penyiksaan atau menyebar kebencian terhadap kelompok etnis lain? Apakah Anda cukup kuat untuk berkata, saya tidak akan ikut serta? Kenyataannya, sebagian besar dari kita tidak cukup kuat atau memilih untuk tidak kuat. Kita seringkali ikut arus.
I'm reminded of my grandmother when I talk about this, whenever I talk about this. She is Jewish, and like all European Jews, or most European Jews of her generation, has a history in the war. For as long as I've known her, which is of course my entire life, she always talks to me about the watershed. What she means is there's a turning point in every situation. And if that situation is very serious, what you choose to do in that turning point can be a matter of life and death, your own or that of somebody else's. Sadly, her experience was that not many people were left standing after that turning point. And she's not alone in that experience. I worked with people from Yugoslavia or Rwanda where they know all too well that sometimes the person you think you know, or even yourself, you, can turn into something else, something not so pleasant, if the situation is there, if the circumstances are right. It's re-
Saya teringat nenek saya ketika membahas ini. Beliau adalah seorang Yahudi dan seperti kebanyakan Yahudi Eropa seusianya, ia punya sejarah dalam masa perang. Sejak kecil beliau selalu berbicara tentang titik balik. Menurutnya, dalam setiap situasi ada titik krusial dan kalau situasinya serius, keputusan yang Anda ambil pada titik itu bisa menentukan hidup atau mati nyawa Anda maupun orang lain. Maaf saya tertinggal, dan dia bukan satu-satunya yang berpikir begitu. Saya pernah bekerja dengan orang-orang dari Yugoslavia dan Rwanda. Mereka tahu betul bahwa kadang orang yang kita pikir kita kenal, bahkan diri kita sendiri, bisa berubah menjadi sesuatu yang tak terbayangkan jika situasinya memungkinkan.
really easy for us to distance ourselves from those people who do those things because we're not in that situation right now. And you don't want to think about yourself in that way. I want to say I would never do that. And I think we all do. But the fact is that it is truly difficult for every one of us to resist if we find ourselves in a situation where violence is everywhere. And that's depressing to think about, isn't it?
Ya, sangat mudah bagi kita untuk mengambil jarak dari orang-orang yang melakukan hal buruk itu karena kita tidak berada dalam situasi seperti itu. Dan kita pastinya tidak akan membayangkan diri kita seperti itu. Saya ingin berkata, saya tidak akan pernah melakukan hal seperti itu. Dan saya pikir kita semua ingin percaya pada hal itu. Tapi faktanya sangat sulit bagi siapapun untuk benar-benar menolak ikut serta dalam kekerasan kalau lingkungan sekitarnya penuh kekerasan. Dan itu pemikiran yang menyedihkan, bukan?
And it is. But the point is that, yes, we are all capable of violence. But we are also all capable of not committing violence, of resisting, of making a different choice. And I believe, and I hope that's what I've done a little bit here today, is if we all acknowledge everything that we're capable of as human beings, good and evil, then we might just be a little bit more likely to make the choice not to commit violence, should we, heaven forbid, find ourselves in a situation where it truly matters. Thank you.
Ya, menyedihkan. Tapi intinya adalah kita semua memang punya potensi untuk melakukan kekerasan. Tapi kita juga punya kemampuan untuk tidak melakukannya, untuk menolak, untuk membuat pilihan yang berbeda. Saya percaya dan saya harap hari ini saya telah sedikit membantu membangun kesadaran bahwa jika kita bisa mengakui bahwa sebagai manusia kita mampu melakukan kebaikan maupun kejahatan, maka kita mungkin akan sedikit memilih untuk tidak melakukan kekerasan. Kalau suatu saat kita terpaksa berada dalam situasi yang menuntut pilihan itu. Terima kasih. Okay, that's all from me. Sorry if there's any mistake. Thank you.